That's right. YouTube said it. We live. We lit. We here. We in the building. Greetings and welcome back once again. This is Amuna Solonomics. Left Project, YouTube. Everybody, all kings, everything. It's all good. All praise be to the creator for another day of life. I know why. And I want to thank you guys who come here night after night. Um, Tapping in, going through this Uncle Tom's Cabin. I know you could be somewhere looking at what's happening with R. Kelly's um, ex-girlfriends and watching fight videos, which I want to talk about, but I'm not going to because we got to find out what's going on with Tom and Eliza. Wow, there's a lot in that. I saw it on my way home. I was driving home just listening, and I'm like, mm, yeah, people are sharing it. And then I just have so many questions. There's so much going on beyond like, ooh, look at this. Just a lot going on. But hey, we're here for Uncle Tom's Cabin right now. So let's just get into it. I hope I could be heard. I hope I could be heard. Making sure everything is good. I just saw a few people and then they popped out. So let me make sure there's sound before I continue. Hold on. Hold on. My phone is acting a little weird. Just a little bit. Hold on. Can I be heard? Maybe I got too many applications open. That could be a possibility.
Who is Edom? Who is Edom? You don't want to miss it. I have some brand new music.
Wait a minute. That's not it. Hold on 1 second. Can I be heard? Let me know. My phone is delaying today for some reason. Okay, here we go. There we go. Alrighty. Alrighty. So here we go. I've tried to delay a little bit, but then not too much because the babies be rolling on me if I go too late. They be like, oh, I'm so sleepy. All right. This is what is this? Chapter 13. Let's get it. Oh, I didn't do the recap. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot to recap. I don't know if I can recap 13 chapters. Tom is being sold. They're walking down south. The trader is doing his madness. He's trying to work on his conscience, knowing he's doing jacked up stuff. Um, Eliza's still on the run. She still has the baby. George showed himself to his old employer. He's on his way to Canada. And the lady who was on the boat besides Tom, they stole her baby and sold him. So she jumped off and took herself out in the river. And yeah, that's pretty much where we are right now. So let's press play.
The Quaker settlement. A quiet scene now rises before us. A
Hold on.
large,
Trying to get my
roomy,
bad.
neatly painted kitchen. It's Chapter 13. The Quaker settlement. A quiet scene now rises before us. A large, roomy, neatly painted kitchen, its yellow floor glossy and smooth, and without a particle of dust. A neat, well-blacked cooking stove, rows of shining tin, suggestive of unmentionable good things to the appetite, glossy green wood chairs, old and firm, a small flag-bottomed rocking chair with a patchwork cushion in it, neatly contrived out of small pieces of different colored woolen goods, and a larger-sized one, motherly and old, whose wide arms breathed hospitable invitation, seconded by the solicitation of its feather cushions, a real, comfortable, persuasive old chair, and worth, in the way of honest, homely enjoyment, a dozen of your plush or brochetel drawing-room gentry. And in the chair, gently swaying back and forward, her eyes bent on some fine sewing, sat our fine old friend Eliza. Yes, there she is, paler and thinner than in her Kentucky home, with a world of quiet sorrow lying under the shadow of her long eyelashes, and marking the outline of her gentle mouth. It was plain to see how old and firm the girlish heart was grown under the discipline of heavy sorrow, And when anon her large dark eye was raised to follow the gambols of her little Harry, who was sporting like some tropical butterfly hither and thither over the floor, she showed a depth of firmness and steady resolve that was never there in her earlier and happier days. By her side sat a woman with a bright tin pan in her lap, into which she was carefully sorting some dried peaches. She might be 55 or 60, but hers was one of those faces that time seems to touch only to brighten and adorn. The snowy Lisa crepe cap, made after the straight Quaker pattern, the plain white muslin handkerchief lying in placid folds across her bosom, the drab shawl and dress showed at once the community to which she belonged. Her face was round and rosy, with a healthful downy softness, suggestive of a ripe peach. Her hair, partially silvered by age, was parted smoothly back from a high placid forehead, on which time had written no inscription except peace on earth, goodwill to men, and beneath shone a large pair of clear, honest, loving brown eyes. You only needed to look straight into them to feel that you saw to the bottom of a heart as good and true as ever throbbed in woman's bosom. So much has been said and sung of beautiful young girls. Why don't somebody wake up to the beauty of old women? If any want to get up an inspiration under this head, we refer them to our good friend Rachel Halliday, just as she sits there in her little rocking chair. It had a turn for quacking and squeaking, that chair had, either from having taken cold in early life, or from some asthmatic affection, or perhaps from nervous derangement. But, as she gently swung backward and forward, the chair kept up a kind of subdued creachy-crotchy that would have been intolerable in any other chair. But old Simeon Halliday often declared it was as good as any music to him, and the children all avowed that they wouldn't miss of hearing Mother's chair for anything in the world. For why? For 20 years or more, nothing but loving words and gentle moralities and motherly loving kindness had come from that chair. Headaches and heartaches innumerable had been cured there, difficulties spiritual and temporal solved there, all by one good, loving woman, God bless her. "And so thee still thinks of going to Canada, Eliza?" she said, as she was quietly looking over her peaches. "Yes, ma'am," said Eliza firmly. "I must go onward. I dare not stop." "And what'll thee do when thee gets there? Thee must think about that, my daughter." My daughter came naturally from the lips of Rachel Halliday, for hers was just the face and form that made mother seem the most natural word in the world. Eliza's hands trembled, and some tears fell on her fine work, which she answered firmly. "I shall do anything I can find. I hope I can find something." "Thee knows thee can stay here as long as thee pleases," said Rachel. "Oh, thank you," said Eliza. "But," she pointed to Harry, "I can't sleep nights. I can't rest. Last night I dreamed I saw that man coming into the yard," she said, shuddering. "Poor child," said Rachel, wiping her eyes. "But thee mustn't feel so. The Lord hath ordered it so that never hath a fugitive been stolen from our village. I trust thine will not be the first." The door here opened, and a little short, round, pin-cushiony woman stood at the door, with a cheery, blooming face like a ripe apple. She was dressed, like Rachel, in a sober gray, with a muslin folded neatly across her round, plump little chest.
My apologies, y'all. I know y'all can hear me, but those who just joined us, greetings and welcome back. We read Uncle Tom's Cabin. This is chapter, just I think, what is this, chapter 13? I'm sorry, that the nose part, that joint had me rolling for a second. Oh, I'm sorry. Why did he say the nose, the can stay? I mean, what kind of lingo is that? Okay, my apologies. I'm trying to be mature on that one. I'm gonna press play.
"Ruth Stedman," said Rachel, coming joyfully forward. "How is thee, Ruth?" she said, heartily taking both her hands. "Nicely," said Ruth, taking off her little drab bonnet and dusting it with her handkerchief, displaying, as she did so, a round little head on which the Quaker cap sat with a sort of jaunty air, despite all the stroking and patting of the small fat hands which were busily applied to arranging it. Certain stray locks of decidedly curly hair, too, had escaped here and there, and had to be coaxed and cajoled into their place again. And then the new owner, who might have been 25, turned from the small looking-glass, before which she had been making these arrangements, and looked well pleased, as most people who looked at her might have been, for she was decidedly a wholesome, whole-hearted, chirruping little woman, as ever gladdened a man's heart withal. "Ruth, this friend is Eliza Harris, and this is the little boy I told thee of." "I am glad to see thee, Eliza, very," said Ruth, shaking hands, as if Eliza were an old friend she had long been expecting. "And this is thy dear boy. I brought a cake for him," she said, holding out a little heart to the boy, who came up, gazing through his curls, and accepted it shyly. "Where's thy baby, Ruth?" said Rachel. "Oh, he's coming, but thy Mary caught him as I came in, and ran off with him to the barn, to show him to the children." At this moment the door opened, and Mary, an honest, rosy-looking girl with large brown eyes like her mother's, came in with the baby. "Aha!" said Rachel, coming up, and taking the great white fat fellow in her arms. "How good he looks, and how he does grow!" "To be sure he does," said little bustling Ruth, as she took the child, and began taking off a little blue silk hood, and various layers and wrappers of outer garments, and having given a twitch here and a pull there, and variously adjusted and arranged him, and kissed him heartily, she set him on the floor to collect his thoughts. Baby seemed quite used to this mode of proceeding, for he put his thumb in his mouth, as if it were quite a thing, of course, and seemed soon absorbed in his own reflections, while the mother seated herself, and taking out a long stocking of mixed blue and white yarn, began to knit with briskness. "Mary, thee'd better fill the kettle, hadn't thee?" gently suggested the mother. Mary took the kettle to the well, and soon reappearing, placed it over the stove, where it was soon purring and steaming, a sort of center of hospitality and good cheer. The peaches, moreover, in obedience to a few gentle whispers from Rachel, were soon deposited, by the same hand, in a stew-pan over the fire. Rachel now took down a snowy moulding board, and, tying on an apron, proceeded quietly to making up some biscuits, first saying to Mary, "Mary, hadn't thee better tell John to get a chicken ready?" And Mary disappeared accordingly. "And how is Abigail Peters?" said Rachel, as she went on with her biscuits. "Oh, she's better," said Ruth. "I was in this morning, made the bed, tidied up the house. Leah Hills went in this afternoon, and baked bread and pies, enough to last some days, and I engaged to go back to get her up this evening. I will go in tomorrow, and do any cleaning there may be, and look over the mending," said Rachel. "Ah, that is well," said Ruth. "I've heard," she added, "that Hannah Stanwood is sick. John was up there last night. I must go there tomorrow." "John can come in here to his meals if thee needs to stay all day," suggested Rachel. "Thank thee, Rachel. We'll see tomorrow. But here comes Simeon." Simeon Halliday, a tall, straight, muscular man in drab coat and pantaloons and broad-brimmed hat, now entered. "How is thee, Ruth?" he said warmly, as he spread his broad, open hand for her little fat palm. "And how is John?" "Oh, John is well, and all the rest of our folks," said Ruth cheerily. "Any news, father?" said Rachel, as she was putting her biscuits into the oven. "Peter Stebbins told me that they should be along tonight with friends," said Simeon significantly, as he was washing his hands at a neat sink in a little back porch. "Indeed," said Rachel, looking thoughtfully and glancing at Eliza. "Did thee say thy name was Harris?" said Simeon to Eliza, as he re-entered. Rachel glanced quickly at her husband, as Eliza tremulously answered, "Yes," her fears, ever uppermost, suggesting that possibly there might be advertisements out for her. "Mother," said Simeon, standing in the porch, and calling Rachel out. "What does thee want, father?" said Rachel, rubbing her floury hands as she went into the porch. "This child's husband is in the settlement, and will be here tonight," said Simeon. "Now, thee doesn't know that, father," said Rachel, all her face radiant with joy. "It's really true. Peter was down yesterday, with the wagon, to the other stand, and there he found an old woman and 2 men, and one said his name was George Harris, and from what he told of his history, I am certain who he is. He is a bright, likely fellow, too." "Shall we tell her now?" said Simeon. "Let's tell Ruth," said Rachel. "Here, Ruth, come here." Ruth laid down her knitting work and was in the back porch in a moment. "Ruth, what does thee think?" said Rachel. "Father says Eliza's husband is in the last company and will be here tonight." A burst of joy from the little Quakeress interrupted the speech. She gave such a bound from the floor as she clapped her little hands that 2 stray curls fell from under her Quaker cap and lay brightly on her white neckerchief. "Hush thee, dear," said Rachel gently. "Hush, Ruth. Tell us. Shall we tell her now?" "Now, to be sure, this very minute. Why, now, s'pose 'twas my John, how should I feel? Do tell her right off." "Thee uses thyself only to learn how to love thy neighbor, Ruth," said Simeon, looking with a beaming face on Ruth. "To be sure. Isn't it what we are made for? If I didn't love John and the baby, I should not know how to feel for her. Come, now, do tell her, do." And she laid her hands persuasively on Rachel's arm. "Take her into thy bedroom there, and let me fry the chicken while thee does it." Rachel came out into the kitchen where Eliza was sewing, and opening the door of a small bedroom, said gently, "Come in here with me, my daughter. I have news to tell thee." The blood flushed in Eliza's pale face. She rose, trembling with nervous anxiety, and looked towards her boy. "No, no," said little Ruth, darting up and seizing her hands. "Never thee fear. It's good news, Eliza. Go in, go in." And she gently pushed her to the door, which closed after her. And then, turning round, she caught little Harry in her arms and began kissing him. "Thee'll see thy father, little one. Does thee know it? Thy father is coming," she said over and over again, as the boy looked wonderingly at her. Meanwhile, within the door, another scene was going on. Rachel Halliday drew Eliza toward her and said, "The Lord hath had mercy on thee, daughter. Thy husband hath escaped from the house of bondage." The blood flushed to Eliza's cheek in a sudden glow, and went back to her heart with as sudden a rush. She sat down pale and faint. "Have courage, child," said Rachel, laying her hand on her head. "He is among friends, who will bring him here tonight." "Tonight," Eliza repeated. "Tonight." The words lost all meaning to her. Her head was dreamy and confused. All was mist for a moment. When she awoke, she found herself snugly tucked up on the bed, with a blanket over her, and little Ruth rubbing her hands with camphor. She opened her eyes in a state of dreamy, delicious languor, such as one who has long been bearing a heavy load, and now feels it gone, and would rest. The tension of the nerves, which had never ceased a moment since the first hour of her flight, had given way, and a strange feeling of security and rest came over her. And as she lay, with her large dark eyes open, she followed, as in a quiet dream, the motions of those about her. She saw the door open into the other room, saw the supper table, with its snowy cloth, heard the dreamy murmur of the singing tea-kettle, saw Ruth tripping backward and forward, with plates of cake and saucers of preserves, and ever and anon stopping to put a cake into Harry's hand, or pat his head, or twine his long curls round her snowy fingers. She saw the ample, motherly form of Rachel as she ever and anon came to the bedside and smoothed and arranged something about the bedclothes, and gave a tuck here and there by way of expressing her goodwill, and was conscious of a kind of sunshine beaming down upon her from her large, clear brown eyes. She saw Ruth's husband come in, saw her fly up to him, and commence whispering very earnestly, ever and anon, with impressive gesture, pointing her little finger toward the room. She saw her, with the baby in her arms, sitting down to tea. She saw them all at table, and little Harry in a high chair, under the shadow of Rachel's ample wing. There were low murmurs of talk, gentle tinkling of teaspoons, and musical clatter of cups and saucers, and all mingled in a delightful dream of rest, and Eliza slept, as she had not slept before, since the fearful midnight hour when she had taken her child and fled through the frosty starlight. She dreamed of a beautiful country, a land, it seemed to her, of rest, green shores, pleasant islands, and beautifully glittering water. And there, in a house which kind voices told her was a home, she saw her boy playing, free and happy child. She heard her husband's footsteps. She felt him coming nearer. His arms were around her, his tears falling on her face, and she awoke. It was no dream. The daylight had long faded. Her child lay calmly sleeping by her side, a candle was burning dimly on the stand, and her husband was sobbing by her pillow.
Oh
The next
man, y'all, they got me. Whew, man. We ain't done chapter 13. We almost done, but wow, that's a lot. She like the from the time that she fled until that moment, she have been on high alert. You know what I'm saying? Adrenaline rush, high alert, no rest. And she finally finds a place to rest and hears that her husband, who also ran away, is alive. So she's trying to keep herself alive, her child alive, and she didn't know where he was, and he's alive and he's there. I mean, okay, I'm sorry. I just had to process that. I'm press play.
morning was a cheerful one at the Quaker house. Mother was up betimes and surrounded by busy girls and boys whom we had scarce time to introduce to our readers yesterday, and who all moved obediently to Rachel's gentle, "Thee had better," or more gentle, "Hadn't thee better?" in the work of getting breakfast. For a breakfast in the luxurious valleys of Indiana is a thing complicated and multiform, and, like picking up the rose leaves and trimming the bushes in paradise, asking other hands than those of the original mother. While, therefore, John ran to the spring for fresh water, and Simeon the second sifted meal for corn cakes, and Mary ground coffee, Rachel moved gently and quietly about, making biscuits, cutting up chicken, and diffusing a sort of sunny radiance over the whole proceeding generally. If there was any danger of friction or collision from the ill-regulated zeal of so many young operators, her gentle "Come, come," or "I wouldn't now," was quite sufficient to allay the difficulty. Bards have written of the cestus of Venus that turned the heads of all the world in successive generations. We had rather, for our part, have the cestus of Rachel Halliday that kept heads from being turned, and made everything go on harmoniously. We think it is more suited to our modern days, decidedly. While all other preparations were going on, Simeon the elder stood in his shirt-sleeves before a little looking-glass in the corner, engaged in the anti-patriarchal operation of shaving. Everything went on so sociably, so quietly, so harmoniously in the great kitchen. It seemed so pleasant to everyone to do just what they were doing. There was such an atmosphere of mutual confidence and good fellowship everywhere. Even the knives and forks had a social clatter as they went on to the table, and the chicken and ham had a cheerful and joyous fizzle in the pan, as if they rather enjoyed being cooked than otherwise. And when George and Eliza and little Harry came out, they met such a hearty, rejoicing welcome, no wonder it seemed to them like a dream. At last they were all seated at breakfast, while Mary stood at the stove, baking griddle cakes, which, as they gained the true exact golden-brown tint of perfection, were transferred quite handily to the table. Rachel never looked so truly and benignly happy as at the head of her table. There was so much motherliness and full-heartedness even in the way she passed a plate of cakes or poured a cup of coffee, that it seemed to put a spirit into the food and drink she offered. It was the first time that ever George had sat down on equal terms at any white man's table, and he sat down at first with some constraint and awkwardness, but they all exhaled and went off like fog in the genial morning rays of this simple, overflowing kindness. This indeed was a home. Home, a word that George had never yet known a meaning for, and a belief in God and trust in his providence began to encircle his heart, as with a golden cloud of protection and confidence, dark, misanthropic, pining atheistic doubts and fierce despair melted away before the light of a living gospel, breathed in living faces, preached by 1,000 unconscious acts of love and goodwill, which, like the cup of cold water given in the name of a disciple, shall never lose their reward. "Father, what if these should get found out again?" said Simeon second, as he buttered his cake. "I should pay my fine," said Simeon gently. "But what if they put thee in prison?" "Couldn't thee and mother manage the farm?" said Simeon, smiling. "Mother can do almost everything," said the boy. "But isn't it a shame to make such laws?" "Thee mustn't speak evil of thy rulers, Simeon," said his father gravely. The Lord only gives us our worldly goods that we may do justice and mercy. If our rulers require a price of us for it, we must deliver it up. Well, I hate those old slaveholders, said the boy, who felt as unchristian as became any modern reformer. I am surprised at thee, son, said Simeon. Thy mother never taught thee so. I would do even the same for the slaveholder as for the slave, if the Lord brought him to my door in affliction. Simeon's second blushed scarlet, but his mother only smiled and said, Simeon is my good boy. He will grow older by and by, and then he will be like his father. I hope, my good sir, that you are not exposed to any difficulty on our account, said George anxiously. Fear nothing, George, for therefore are we sent into the world. If we would not meet trouble for a good cause, we were not worthy of our name. But for me, said George, I could not bear it. Fear not then, friend George, it is not for thee, but for God and man we do it, said Simeon. And now thou must lie quietly this day, and tonight at 10 o'clock Phineas Fletcher will carry thee onward to the next stand, thee and the rest of thy company. The pursuers are hard after thee. We must not delay. If that is the case, why wait till evening, said George. Thou art safe here by daylight, for every one in the settlement is a friend, and all are watching. It has been found safer to travel by night. End of chapter 13. Chapter 14.
End of chapter 13. For those who just joined us, Uncle Tom's Cabin, chapter 13. It was a momentary, a moment of relief where they met up. Liza, her son, and their son, and George. And he was able, because again, along this underground railroad, there are certain people who are known to take in they get word and they take in people, they hide them, and then they help them along the way. That's what the underground railroad was. And so he was with a George, if you remember last chapter, he was with a guy from Ohio who has take this run before, but he met up with him because the guy came back to free his mother, and so he showed George what to do and where to go and how to go on. And so that's what that is. We are going to listen to one more. This is a very long book. I didn't realize how long the book is. Very long book. The first part is 8 hours and 44 minutes. But we are more than halfway through it. We got the 5 hour, 36-minute mark. So there's just, let me see how many more chapters in this first part. In the first part, what did we say, 13 and 14? After this, we're going to have 4 more chapters. But I just find it weird the way they named it Uncle Tom's Cabin when the actual name that she had was like The Life of the Lowly or something. Something to that effect. Yeah, Life Among the Lowly. Because, uh, you know, they made it seem like this is all about Uncle Tom's Cabin, but not really. I guess they wanted to, I don't know. Let me see anything. Could we accept a slave catcher at our door if they were in distress? That's the conversation that they were having. These are Quakers having this conversation, and the young boy, Simeon II, he was like, "Nah," you know what I mean? And his father saying, "Oh, I would help him." And it really depends. That situation came up in the show Underground. I don't know how many people followed that show a couple of years ago, but I think if I remember correctly, that situation came up in the Underground. And with that, one has to be careful because mm, one would want to think that, you're helping someone. And oftentimes, especially in this case, oftentimes you may help them to your own demise. Like you strengthen them and then they turn around and bite you. Like I'm going to give y'all a proverbial saying that if you're sorry for manga dog, them turn around and bite you. So you're sorry for the stray dog. And that stray dog, when you feed them and you strengthen them, and then they turn around and bite you, you know. And so there's wisdom in all that we do. I would say that it says, when you do good, know unto whom you do good to. You know what I mean? So I would leave that one right there. But I'm gonna play chapter 13. Definitely leave your questions and comments in the box.
Evangeline, a
14.
young star, which shone o'er life too sweet an image for such glass, a lovely being, scarcely formed or moulded, a rose with all its sweetest leaves yet folded. The Mississippi, how, as by an enchanted wand, have its scenes been changed since Chateaubriand wrote his prose poetic description of it. Note, in Atala, or The Love and Constancy of Two Savages in the Desert, 1801, by François-Auguste René, Vicomte de Chateaubriand, 1768-1848. As a river of mighty, unbroken solitudes, rolling amid undreamed wonders of vegetable and animal existence. But as in an hour, this river of dreams and wild romance has emerged to a reality scarcely less visionary and splendid. What other river of the world bears on its bosom to the ocean the wealth and enterprise of such another country, a country whose products embrace all between the tropics and the poles? Those turbid waters, hurrying, foaming, tearing along, an apt resemblance of that headlong tide of business which is poured along its wave by a race more vehement and energetic than any the old world ever saw. Ah, would that they did not also bear along a more fearful freight, the tears of the oppressed, the sighs of the helpless, the bitter prayers of poor ignorant hearts to an unknown God, unknown, unseen, and silent, but who will yet come out of his place and save all the poor of the earth. The slanting light of the setting sun quivers on the sea-like expanse of the river. The shivery canes and the tall, dark cypress, hung with wreaths of dark, funereal moss, glow in the golden ray as the heavily laden steamboat marches onward. Piled with cotton bales from many a plantation, up over deck and sides, till she seems in the distance a square, massive block of gray, she moves heavily onward to the nearing mart. We must look some time among its crowded decks before we shall find again our humble friend Tom. High on the upper deck, in a little nook among the everywhere predominant cotton bales, at last we may find him. Partly from confidence inspired by Mr. Shelby's representations, and partly from the remarkably inoffensive and quiet character of the man, Tom had insensibly won his way far into the confidence even of such a man as Haley. At first he had watched him narrowly through the day, and never allowed him to sleep at night unfettered, but the uncomplaining patience and apparent contentment of Tom's manner led him gradually to discontinue these restraints, and for some time Tom had enjoyed a sort of parole of honor, being permitted to come and go freely where he pleased on the boat. Ever quiet and obliging, and more than ready to lend a hand in every emergency which occurred among the workmen below, he had won the good opinion of all the hands, and spent many hours in helping them with as hearty a good-will as ever he worked on a Kentucky farm. When there seemed to be nothing for him to do, he would climb to a nook among the cotton bales of the upper deck and busy himself in studying over his Bible, and it is there we see him now. For 100 or more miles above New Orleans, the river is higher than the surrounding country, and rolls its tremendous volume between massive levees 20 feet in height. The traveler from the deck of the steamer, as from some floating castle-top, overlooks the whole country for miles and miles around. Tom, therefore, had spread out full before him, in plantation after plantation, a map of the life to which he was approaching. He saw the distant slaves at their toil. He saw afar their villages of huts gleaming out in long rows on many a plantation, distant from the stately mansions and pleasure grounds of the master. And as the moving picture passed on, his poor, foolish heart would be turning backward to the Kentucky farm, with its old shadowy beeches, to the master's house, with its wide, cool halls, and nearby the little cabin overgrown with the multiflora and bignonia. There he seemed to see familiar faces of comrades who had grown up with him from infancy. He saw his busy wife bustling in her preparations for his evening meals. He heard the merry laugh of his boys at their play, and the chirrup of the baby at his knee. And then, with a start, all faded, and he saw again the canebrakes and cypresses and gliding plantations, and heard again the creaking and groaning of the machinery, all telling him too plainly that all that phase of life had gone by forever. In such a case, You write to your wife and send messages to your children. But Tom could not write. The mail for him had no existence, and the gulf of separation was unbridged by even a friendly word or signal. Is it strange, then, that some tears fall on the pages of his Bible as he lays it on the cotton bale, and, with patient finger, threading his slow way from word to word, traces out its promises? Having learned late in life, Tom was but a slow reader, and passed on laboriously from verse to verse. Fortunate for him was it that the book he was intent on was one which slow reading cannot injure, nay, one whose words, like ingots of gold, seem often to need to be weighed separately, that the mind may take in their priceless value. Let us follow him a moment, as, pointing to each word and pronouncing each half aloud, he reads, "Let not your heart be troubled. In my Father's house are many mansions. I go to prepare a place for you." Cicero, when he buried his darling and only daughter, had a heart as full of honest grief as poor Tom's, perhaps no fuller, for both were only men. But Cicero could pause over no such sublime words of hope, and look to no such future reunion, and if he had seen them, 10 to 1 he would not have believed. He must fill his head first with 1,000 questions of authenticity of manuscript and correctness of translation. But to poor Tom, there it lay, just what he needed, so evidently true and divine that the possibility of a question never entered his simple head. It must be true, for, if not true, how could he live? As for Tom's Bible, though it had no annotations and helps in margin from learned commentators, still it had been embellished with certain waymarks and guide-boards of Tom's own invention, and which helped him more than the most learned expositions could have done. It had been his custom to get the Bible read to him by his master's children, in particular by young Master George, and as they read, he would designate by bold, strong marks and dashes, with pen and ink, the passages which more particularly gratified his ear or affected his heart. His Bible was thus marked through, from one end to the other, with a variety of styles and designations, so he could in a moment seize upon his favorite passages, without the labor of spelling out what lay between them. And while it lay there before him, every passage breathing of some old home scene, and recalling some past enjoyment, his Bible seemed to him all of this life that remained, as well as the promise of a future one. Among the passengers on the boat was a young gentleman of fortune and family, resident in New Orleans, who bore the name of St. Clair. He had with him a daughter between 5 and 6 years of age, together with a lady who seemed to claim relationship to both, and to have the little one especially under her charge. Tom had often caught glimpses of this little girl, for she was one of those busy, tripping creatures that can be no more contained in one place than a sunbeam or a summer breeze. Nor was she one that, once seen, could be easily forgotten. Her form was the perfection of childish beauty, without its usual chubbiness and squareness of outline. There was about it an undulating and aerial grace, such as one might dream of for some mythic and allegorical being. Her face was remarkable less for its perfect beauty of feature than for a singular and dreamy earnestness of expression, which made the ideal start when they looked at her, and by which the dullest and most literal were impressed, without exactly knowing why. The shape of her head, and the turn of her neck and bust, was peculiarly noble, and the long golden-brown hair that floated like a cloud around it, the deep spiritual gravity of her violet-blue eyes, shaded by heavy fringes of golden brown, all marked her out from other children, and made everyone turn and look after her as she glided hither and thither on the boat. Nevertheless, the little one was not what you would have called either a grave child or a sad one. On the contrary, an airy and innocent playfulness seemed to flicker like the shadow of summer leaves over her childish face and around her buoyant figure. She was always in motion, always with a half-smile on her rosy mouth, flying hither and thither with an undulating and cloud-like tread, singing to herself as she moved, as in a happy dream. Her father and female guardian were incessantly busy in the pursuit of her, but, when caught, she melted from them again like a summer cloud, and as no word of chiding or reproof ever fell on her ear for whatever she chose to do, she pursued her own way all over the boat. Always dressed in white, she seemed to move like a shadow through all sorts of places, without contracting spot or stain, and there was not a corner or nook above or below where those fairy footsteps had not glided, and that visionary golden head with its deep blue eyes fleeted along.
All right, we almost to the end of this one here. Just want to give a little welcome to those who just joined us. We are at the latter part of chapter 14. If you have any questions or comments as we listen and read along, don't mind me. I just put things in the box that just pop up into my mind, like things that reoccur. It seems that Harriet Beecher still likes the word undulating. She says it like 50 times. She likes the word ejaculation, not in the way that the word has become now. That's another word that she used 50 times. And she likes to color, you know, where she's cut it, I see, even though this is an abolitionist work, I still see the handiwork. She has her crayolas in her hand and her paintbrush, and she's coloring all things European in this whimsical type language and this flowery language, this benign language. And then when she comes to describe melanated people, you see that she takes her pen and strokes it in a different direction. And it's just interesting to hear. So please don't mind me as I just type stuff that I wanted to revisit in the box, but I'll just let the rest play out.
The fireman, as he looked up from his sweaty toil, sometimes found those eyes looking wonderingly into the raging depths of the furnace, and fearfully and pityingly at him, as if she thought him in some dreadful danger. Anon the steersman at the wheel paused and smiled, as the picture-like head gleamed through the window of the roundhouse, and in a moment was gone again. 1,000 times a day rough voices blessed her, and smiles of unwonted softness stole over hard faces as she passed, and when she tripped fearlessly over dangerous places, rough, sooty hands were stretched involuntarily out to save her and smooth her path. Tom, who had the soft, impressible nature of his kindly race, ever yearning toward the simple and childlike, watched the little creature with daily increasing interest. To him she seemed something almost divine, and whenever her golden head and deep blue eyes peered out upon him from behind some dusky cotton bale, or looked down upon him over some ridge of packages, he half believed that he saw one of the angels stepped out of his New Testament. Often and often she walked mournfully round the place where Haley's gang of men and women sat in their chains. She would glide in among them and look at them with an air of perplexed and sorrowful earnestness, and sometimes she would lift their chains with her slender hands, and then sigh woefully as she glided away. Several times she appeared suddenly among them with her hands full of candy, nuts, and oranges, which she would distribute joyfully to them, and then be gone again. Tom watched the little lady a great deal before he ventured on any overtures towards acquaintanceship. He knew an abundance of simple acts to propitiate and invite the approaches of the little people, and he resolved to play his part right skillfully. He could cut cunning little baskets out of cherry stones, could make grotesque faces on hickory nuts, or odd jumping figures out of elder pith, and he was a very pan in the manufacture of whistles of all sizes and sorts. His pockets were full of miscellaneous articles of attraction, which he had hoarded in days of old for his master's children, and which he now produced with commendable prudence and economy, one by one, as overtures for acquaintance and friendship. The little one was shy, for all her busy interest in everything going on, and it was not easy to tame her. For a while she would perch like a canary bird on some box or package near Tom, while busy in the little arts aforenamed, and take from him, with a kind of grave bashfulness, the little articles he offered. But at last they got on quite confidential terms. "What's little missy's name?" said Tom at last, when he thought matters were ripe to push such an inquiry. "Evangeline St. Clair," said the little one, "though Papa and everybody else call me Eva. Now what's your name?" "My name's Tom. The little children used to call me Uncle Tom, way back thar in Kentuck." "Then I mean to call you Uncle Tom, because you see, I like you," said Eva. "So, Uncle Tom, where are you going?" "I don't "No, Miss Eva."
"Don't know?" said Eva.
"No, I am going to be sold to somebody, I don't know who."
"My papa can buy you," said Eva quickly. "And if he buys you, you will have good times. I mean to ask him this very day."
"Thank you, my little lady," said Tom. The boat here stopped at a small landing to take in wood, and Eva, hearing her father's voice, bounded nimbly away. Tom rose up and went forward to offer his service in wooding, and soon was busy among the hands. Eva and her father were standing together by the railings to see the boat start from the landing place. The wheel had made 2 or 3 revolutions in the water when, by some sudden movement, the little one suddenly lost her balance and fell sheer over the side of the boat into the water. Her father, scarce knowing what he did, was plunging in after her, but was held back by some behind him, who saw that more efficient aid had followed his child. Tom was standing just under her on the lower deck as she fell. He saw her strike the water and sink, and was after her in a moment. A broad-chested, strong-armed fellow, it was nothing for him to keep afloat in the water till, in a moment or two, the child rose to the surface, and he caught her in his arms and, swimming with her to the boat's side, handed her up, all dripping, to the grasp of hundreds of hands, which, as if they had all belonged to one man, were stretched eagerly out to receive her. A few moments more, and her father bore her, dripping and senseless, to the ladies' cabin, where, as is usual in cases of the kind, there ensued a very well-meaning and kind-hearted strife among the female occupants generally as to who should do the most things to make a disturbance, and to hinder her recovery in every way possible. It was a sultry, close day the next day, as the steamer drew near to New Orleans. A general bustle of expectation and preparation was spread through the boat. In the cabin, one and another were gathering their things together and arranging them, preparatory to going ashore. The steward and chambermaid and all were busily engaged in cleaning, furbishing, and arranging the splendid boat, preparatory to a grand entrée. On the lower deck sat our friend Tom, with his arms folded, and anxiously, from time to time, turning his eyes towards a group on the other side of the boat. There stood the fair Evangeline, a little paler than the day before, but otherwise exhibiting no traces of the accident which had befallen her. A graceful, elegantly formed young man stood by her, carelessly leaning one elbow on a bale of cotton while a large pocketbook lay open before him. It was quite evident at a glance that the gentleman was Eva's father. There was the same noble cast of head, the same large blue eyes, the same golden-brown hair, yet the expression was wholly different. In the large, clear blue eyes, though in form and color exactly similar, there was wanting that misty, dreamy depth of expression. All was clear, bold, and bright, but with a light wholly of this world. The beautifully cut mouth had a proud and somewhat sarcastic expression, while an air of free and easy superiority sat not ungracefully in every turn and movement of his fine form. He was listening, with a good-humored, negligent air, half comic, half contemptuous, to Haley, who was very volubly expatiating on the quality of the article for which they were bargaining. "All the moral and Christian virtues bound in black morocco complete," he said, when Haley had finished. "Well, now, my good fellow, what's the damage, as they say in Kentucky? In short, what's to be paid out for this business? How much are you going to cheat me now? Out with it." "Well," said Haley, "if I should say $1,300 for that, our fellow, I shouldn't but just save myself. I shouldn't now, really." "Poor fellow," said the young man, fixing his keen, mocking blue eye on him. "But I suppose you'd let me have him for that, out of a particular regard for me." "Well, the young lady here seems to be sot on him, and naturally enough." "Oh, certainly, there's a call on your benevolence, my friend. Now, as a matter of Christian charity, how cheap could you afford to let him go to oblige a young lady that's particularly sot on him?" "Well, now, just think on it," said the trader. "Just look on them limbs, broad-chested, strong as a horse. Look at his head. Them high foreheads allays shows calculating niggers. They'll do any kind of thing. I've marked that Now, a nigger of that heft and build is worth considerable, just as you may say, for his body, supposing he's stupid, but come to put in his calculating faculties and them which I can show he has uncommon, why, of course, it makes him come higher. Why, that our fellow managed his master's whole farm. He has a extraordinary talent for business." Bad, bad, very bad, knows altogether too much, said the young man, with the same mocking smile playing about his mouth. Never will do in the world. Your smart fellows are always running off, stealing horses, and raising the devil generally. I think he'll have to take off a couple of hundred for his smartness. Well, there might be something in that, if it weren't for his character. But I can show recommends from his master and others to prove he is one of your real pious, the most humble, praying, pious critter you ever did see. Why, he's been called a preacher in them parts he came from. And I must use him for a family chaplain, possibly, added the young man dryly. That's quite an idea. Religion is a remarkably scarce article at our house. You're joking now. How do you know I am? Didn't you just warrant him for a preacher? Has he been examined by any synod or council? Come, hand over your papers. If the trader had not been sure, by a certain good-humored twinkle in the large eye, that all this banter was sure, in the long run, to turn out a cash concern, he might have been somewhat out of patience. As it was, he laid down a greasy pocket-book on the cotton bales, and began anxiously studying over certain papers in it, the young man standing by the while, looking down on him with an air of careless, easy drollery. "Papa, do buy him. It's no matter what you pay," whispered Eva softly, getting up on a package, and putting her arm around her father's neck. "You have money enough, I know. I want him." "What for, pussy? Are you going to use him for a rattle-box or a rocking horse, or what?" "I want to make him happy." An original reason, certainly. Here the trader handed up a certificate signed by Mr. Shelby, which the young man took with the tips of his long fingers and glanced over carelessly. "A gentlemanly hand," he said, "and well spelt, too. Well, now, I'm not sure, after all, about this religion," said he, the old wicked expression returning to his eye. "The country is almost ruined with pious white people, and such pious politicians as we have just before elections, such pious goings-on in all departments of church and state, that a fellow does not know who'll cheat him next. I don't know either about religions being up in the market just now. I have not looked in the papers lately to see how it sells. How many $100 now do you put on for this religion?" "You like to be joking now," said the trader. "But then there's sense under all that thar. I know there's differences in religion. Some kinds is miserable. There's your meetin' pious. There's your singin', roarin' pious. Them ain't no account in black or white. But these railly is. And I've seen it in niggers as often as any, your rail softly, quiet, steady, honest pious, that the hull world couldn't tempt 'em to do nothing that they think's wrong. And you see in this letter what Tom's old master says about him." "Now," said the young man, stooping gravely over his book of bills, "if you can assure me that I really can buy this kind of pious, and that it will be set down to my account in the book up above as something belonging to me, I wouldn't care if I did go a little extra for it. How'd you say?" "Well, Rally, I can't do that," said the trader. "I'm a-thinking that every man'll have to hang on his own hook in them our quarters." "Rather hard on a fellow that pays extra on religion and can't trade with it in the state where he wants it most, ain't it now?" said the young man, who had been making out a roll of bills while he was speaking. "There, count your money, old boy," he added as he handed the roll to the trader. "All right," said Haley, his face beaming with delight, and pulling out an old inkhorn he proceeded to fill out a bill of sale, which in a few moments he handed to the young man. "I wonder now, if I was divided up and inventoried," said the latter as he ran over the paper, "how much I might bring. Say, so much for the shape of my head, so much for a high forehead, so much for arms and hands and legs, and then so much for education, learning, talent, honesty, religion. Bless me, there would be small charge on that last, I'm thinking. But come, Eva," he said, and taking the hand of his daughter, he stepped across the boat, and carelessly putting the tip of his finger under Tom's chin, said good-humoredly, "Look up, Tom, and see how you like your new master." Tom looked up. It was not in nature to look into that gay, young, handsome face without a feeling of pleasure, and Tom felt the tears start in his eyes as he said heartily, "God bless you, massa." "Well, I hope he will. What's your name? Tom? Quite as likely to do for your asking as mine, from all accounts. Can you drive horses, Tom?"
I've been always used to horses, said Tom. Master Shelby raised heaps of 'em. Well, I think I shall put you in a coachee on condition that you won't be drunk more than once a week, unless in cases of emergency, Tom. Tom looked surprised and rather hurt and said, I never drink, massa. I've heard that story before, Tom, but then we'll see. It will be a special accommodation to all concerned if you don't. Never mind, my boy, he added good-humoredly, seeing Tom still looked grave. I don't doubt you mean to do well. I certain do, massa, said Tom. And you shall have good times, said Eva. Papa is very good to everybody, only he always will laugh at them. Papa is much obliged to you for his recommendation, said St. Clair, laughing, as he turned on his heel and walked away. End of chapter 14.
Oh my goodness, that was a long chapter. Oh my goodness. I was trying not to press stop. What in the world? Merciful Father. Oh my goodness. For those who just joined us, that was chapter 14. I don't know what about chapter 14 just rubbed me the wrong way. What is wrong with Shorty? What is good with, first of all, what is good with Harriet Beecher Stowe? She's doing I mean, I know you didn't have no TV and no radio back in the day, but you're doing the absolute most with your thesaurus. Like, she's doing way too much. Number one. Number two, what is good with Eva? Like I said, this is not Ninjas R Us. Why is she up in there begging for Tom like Tom is the latest toy? Please, Daddy. I know you can afford him, Daddy. Yeah, I'm like, what in the world? What in the? But this is breathe. This is the objectification that was going on in that time and how it was normalized. Like Shorty was like, "Yo, my pops will buy you." Like, what type of conversation? Oh my goodness. I'm sorry, Eva. I don't know what it was. I don't know what it was. I'm like, no, Tom, please don't start talking to Eva. Please don't start talking to Eva. He starts talking to Eva. Well, I mean, the way he described it, yes, 'cause the way Harriet, I'm gonna call her Harriet. The way Harriet over there with her little whimsical pen, the way she described it, like she had to be like 5, 6 years old. She's little. She's but she's around in that age. That's what I got from it. She's not that old, but she's not all the way like a baby because she over here talking and stuff. So I would put her around 5, 6 years old, thereabouts. Yeah, chapter 14 got me going. Tom crying from looking. Yeah, what? Harriet is on some. She was on some mint julep when she was writing that chapter. Like, why would Tom want to look in? What did she call it? I put it in the box. What did she say his eyes were? Oh, these descriptions got me, y'all. I'm sorry. The descriptions. Um, what did she say? Anything time I hear something alarming. What did she say? His beautifully cut mouth, his handsome face. Like, what is really good with you, Harriet? Right. It's not funny. I'm laughing so that I don't get too turned up, y'all. If you listen to the older videos of me, I get a little more turned up. I kind of learn to like take the edge off a little bit. But this chapter was this chapter blindsided me, y'all. It blindsided me. Yes. Yeah, she said his gay face, his cold crystal blue eyes. I'm like, what? Handsome gay face, and thank you. That's what she said. I left. What? King T. She's acting like she at Walmart in the child section, looking at the Barbie dolls, and she acting like Tom is Ken. What is really good with Eva? And Tom, like you said, I could see how when you read this, you could be like, yo, Tom is tripping. Because Tom is like, forget y'all. I'm gonna do what I gotta do so that my life is not hard. That's what I'm getting from Tom. Like, so that he don't have a hard life. He's like, yo, I'm just gonna be the all around guy that gets it done. So that, they could take these chains off of me, they could take these feathers off of me. And he got a little parole. He got a little parole on the boat. It was like, hey, he took the chains off his feet. He got to walk around. So Tom is like, man, I don't like that hard labor. Y'all all right with that? Let me go front up little Eva over here. and see what's good with her. Maybe she getting good with her peoples, and then I'll be alright. That's what I'm getting from Tom so far. I'm sorry, y'all. This chapter was a doozy. We're gonna have to listen to a melanated slave narrative coming from the other perspective, because this lady is, you know that new thing they have, poopery, where it's all stinky and then they spray the poopery and it's supposed to make the stink gone. That's what she's spraying right now with all of these flowery words. She's spraying a lot of poopery on this narrative. I know it sparked a lot of discussion, but come on, Harriet, come on. Um, ER is Eva's PR for her pop. Yeah, she's the tentacles. He probably, she goes out there and, that whole scene was just weird. That whole scene was just weird. Like, where was her father when Tom was over there? Had this big old broad chested, so-called black man. Like they were saying, where was the father when Tom was chopping it up with Eva? You know, questions. I'm sorry, y'all. I see it's bedtime for me. Let me see. Did I miss anything? Yeah, and oh, this is what I wanted to talk about. And LF caught it too. Calculating ninjas. Listen to how they reference smart melanated people and how they are trouble and how they plan their escape and how they might steal your horses, and you want them big and strong and not so smart, because being smart or being intelligent is a threat. So they're over there having a conversation about how they don't want no calculating ninjas. I thought that was interesting. Yeah. And then Tom's fate is in the hand of a toddler or a young child. Just all right, y'all. I'm gonna need to go drink me some water. Yeah, we need a palate cleanser. We need a little mint. We need a little water. We need a little something to wash this down with. I think we're gonna read after this the inspiration, which is and this is how I felt when I was reading another it was another slave narrative that was coming from the slave owner's perspective, and I could only take that a little bit at a time, because I was like, is this what y'all was doing when y'all was over there, after dinner, you know what I mean, writing by candlelight? This was what you really thought was going on? Like the way they like put the thesaurus down and just speak so people understand what you're saying. All this undulating and all this extracurricular stuff. Oh, if she say undulating one more time. Oh, Father, if she say undulating one more time. Let me see. Anywho, at any rate, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. This was a wild one. Let me see what we got. We have, I think four. I said four more. We have 15, 16, 17, 18. So we got about like 2 more days of this portion. And then the latter portion. So not bad, not bad. Well, we knocked it out in like a week, a little more than a week. So that's not bad. And it's still a threat to it. That's correct. But we're listening to the mentality, because the reason why you don't want no calculating Negroes is because you're oppressing the Negro and you're extracting the Negro's labor. And so a calculating Negro, an informed Negro, would be a problem because they wouldn't be as easily controlled and manipulated. Um, I feel like the author back in the day, where they like resorts in the 90s trying to fit the biggest words. Yeah, it's like, will you stop? She's like, how many times? I know she ain't had no word. You know how you have Microsoft Word where you could check how many times you said a word. She didn't have that, so she just kept saying undulating as many times. I had to look up undulating. I'm like, lady, okay, let me just look it up, only because that's now a new word in my repertoire. I like interesting new words, but geez, I'm bread. Undulating, the action of moving smoothly up and down. I think she was using it all around. Like, And the example they give is a smoothly rising and falling form, outline, or movement. The road follows the undulations of the countryside. But the way she was saying it, it just sounded weird. So it could just be me or the time, whichever one. Yeah, like the video, thumbs up the video, share, subscribe, and hit the little dingy belly thing in the corner. Because I have to be trying to stall a little bit. But I think I might try to start at 8 o'clock. It depends what time I get in. Um, so that I'm almost finished. So that when y'all come in you could hear. Because once I just start jump right into it, then you kind of miss a little bit of it, but it's all good. We still have the replay. So with that said, everybody, thanks for tuning in. I'm gonna decompress after this one because here we go. Now we're gonna see. Ava probably gonna try to be riding around on Tom's back or something. Like, I don't know. I don't want to go too much far ahead because I don't know how Eva gets down in the story, but she's on my suspect list right now. You know, she's on my suspect list until further notice. So with that said, thanks for tuning in. Everybody have a blessed day. Hit the bell. Yeah, hit the bell. Thank you so much, Queen T. Definitely hit the bell. Um, so that y'all can know when we go live. Ain't that what they say? Trish say you just woke up. It's okay. We just finishing out. You just gonna have to hear the replay. 14 is a doozy, so make sure you have some water by your bedside or something. 14 is a doozy. So we'll be back tomorrow. Most I willing. Tomorrow's the Earth Strong. You done know 40 years strong. But I'ma still show up and do the thing. Alright? One.